In Victoria 2, Russia is often considered one of the most miserable GPs in the game, while simultaneously one of the strongest. More often than not, new players can still somewhat find success with this country early on because, unlike some nations, Russia doesn't have an existential threat that can ruin you in one war. But when you get to the mid-game and late game, Russia can quickly become the largest paper tiger in Europe, and die to either rebels or the German troops sieging down Vladivostok. In this video, I'm gonna be giving you a guide on how to play Russia properly, how to quickly industrialize, make the most of your starting position, and pretty much everything you need to know about this country for single player and also multiplayer. In 1836, the Russian Empire is one of the strongest nations in the game, with a population of 14 million, gigantic territory, access to some of the best RGOs in the game, and multiple viable expansion routes. The primary culture for Russia is Russian, and it starts with 3 accepted cultures: Ukrainian, Belarusian, and Ugrian. Some mods give you decisions to get other cultures accepted as well, but in vanilla these 4 are all you get. One of the advantages Russia has is how the territories they tend to lose in an early war are not accepted cultures of Russia, nor are they particularly important states. So as long as you hold on to Moscow, Russia always has the chance to come back. For example, if Prussia loses a war against France and they take the Rhineland, Prussia has just lost one of their most industrial regions and can no longer form Germany as long as France holds on to that territory. Now, if Russia loses a war against Germany and they take 5 states from you, let's say the Polish states and the Baltics, Russia still has most of their accepted pops, most of their relevant RGOs, and can still scale and put up a proper fight against any other European power. At its best, Russia can completely dominate the continent, conquer some of the best states and colonies in the world, build a gigantic industry, and absolutely crush any other land power in the late game. However, with all of those advantages, comes some of the worst drawbacks and problems that no other GP, or most other GPs, don't have to deal with. Russia has an abysmal 10% literacy, the second lowest literacy of any GP. Russia also starts with no factories, no craftsmen, many scripted events that increase your militancy so you have to deal with rebels far more often, terrible starting technologies, and your geography makes it very difficult to build a navy that can compete with other GPs or even secondary powers with large coastlines like Brazil. As if all of that wasn't enough, most mods give Russia a unique pop type called the Serf. A poor strata pop that can act as a farmer or laborer depending on the province, will always have low literacy and is unable to promote. In the early game, it is recommended that you avoid direct conflict with other GPs unless it's necessary. Your army tech is terrible, you take a lot of casualties, and you have to spend time and resources funding and replacing your army, all of which could be used to improve and scale your nation instead. How do you do that? By industrializing and increasing your literacy. Increasing your literacy is straightforward enough. Just encourage clergymen in your core states until they all have 2% clergymen or more. Also prioritize the philosophy, social thought, and political thought tech trees. Industrializing though can be a bit more complicated. First off, the reason why you even want to build an industry in the first place is for the military goods, so you can properly build and replenish your army, and construction goods so you can keep making and upgrading your military factories. If you don't have mill goods, your army will take casualties and just not reinforce because there are no guns. Factories that make civilian goods are not worth it 99% of the time unless you are really struggling for cash, since they are more profitable. Thankfully, Russia starts off as a monarchy, so you can just put the reactionaries in charge and manually build the factories you want. Now, you need to actually put people in the factories by encouraging craftsmen. The problem is that pops with low literacy have a very low chance to actually change into craftsmen, even with a national focus. So that's one of the reasons why literacy is important for industrializing, and is why nations like Russia and Brazil struggle to industrialize while Japan can do so almost immediately, even if they do start off as unciv. And remember, do not encourage clerks. They take too long to promote, are not as efficient as craftsmen, and should only be considered in the late game due to their output bonus. If you're playing multiplayer, don't try to lock in on just doing industrial and culture techs. However, if people see that you are not investing in mill tech, they will smell blood and invade you. Once you fix your literacy, get some techs, and achieve a moderate population of craftsmen, Russia will start to kick off and become one of the major industrial powers of Europe quite quickly. You will rarely have to worry about resources because of the massive iron mines in the Urals and coal mines near Moscow, and in the late game you can quite easily get a monopoly on oil by just holding Azerbaijan and spearing Romania/Wallachia. The only major resource that Russia lacks is sulfur. Now let's talk about decisions. Russia has lots of them, but I'm only gonna mention the most notable ones. The peasant reform is one of the best decisions in vanilla and the most crucial decision you can take if you're playing with most mods. This decision makes you lose 4 infamy, reduces your militancy by 2, increases your nation's consciousness by 2, and grants you research points. In HPM and many other mods, this is also the decision that you need to take in order to abolish serfdom, which is necessary to actually modernize your nation. The requirements for this decision can vary depending on the mod you're using or the version you're playing, but generally, this decision requires a high militancy, consciousness, and a certain amount of liberal support in the upper house. If you're playing single player, you can cheese this by allying yourself with Prussia, then when the Brothers' War kicks off, you will become the war leader of your side, so you can use that to immediately throw your ally under the bus and surrender. When you lose a war in Vicky 2, you will gain a lot of militancy and consciousness, which is often more than enough to trigger the peasant reform requirements. Another decision is the Peking Convention, which you can get if you sphere Manchuria, and will let you peacefully annex the outer Manchuria region. The AI China has a 10% chance to refuse this though, so be aware of that and don't underestimate China in the early game. One of the most unique decisions Russia has is Defender of Eastern Christendom. This can be taken if the Ottomans fall out of GP and have bad relations with you. When taken, Russia will declare itself the defender of Orthodox Christians in the Ottoman Empire, which will give all other European great powers an event where they can choose to accept Russia's claim or contest you, which can escalate into a major war. If no other GP contests you or you manage to win that war, you get 0.1 prestige per month for the rest of the game, which is roughly 12 prestige per decade. Safe to say, this decision is not worth taking unless you want to LARP, bypass truces, or you're playing a mod that changes the reward you get from this decision into something worthwhile. In HPM, the Baltics, Transcaucasia, and Finland start off as vassals, and you can annex them later on as you go down the political thought tech tree. Now we can talk about diplomacy and game plan. At the start, you should sphere Manchuria for the Peking Convention event, and if it's possible, the Netherlands for their sulfur provinces. When it comes to potential allies, France is your most obvious choice, as they also have an interest in preventing Germany from forming. That said, you could also ally one of the centrals and turn on the other. Russia has 4 viable expansion routes: Central Europe, the Ottomans, India, and China. Central Europe is the hardest to invest in since you'll be dealing with countries that can actually fight back. The idea behind it is to use Russia's massive numbers and early game starting army to immediately knock out either Prussia or Austria. Austria is easier to deal with and some other states have Ukrainian pops, however this will lead to a stronger Germany. Attacking Prussia is more difficult due to their mill tech, though much more rewarding if you can pull it off, since you'll be preventing the NGF from forming by just taking one state. And if you continue expanding into a weakened Prussia, you will find some of the most industrial and resourceful provinces in the game. The problem with this path is that you're playing Russia like an early game bully, and if you can't keep up that momentum, the nations with higher literacy will outscale you. And like I said at the beginning, it's best to avoid conflict with GPs at the start of the game as Russia, and instead focus on literacy and industry so you become a late game monster. That said, this is a totally valid and often even optimal way to play Russia if you keep that momentum and continue expanding west. The Ottomans are the sick man of Europe, they border you and are quite the easy target. Anatolia in particular has some really good iron provinces, and it will increase your naval limit because of the way connected ports work. There are also events that give Russia CBs against the Ottomans to liberate the Balkan nations, so you can use those to quickly secure decent allies in spheres. India is the path you choose if you want to roleplay the whole great game thing, or if you just hate the British. In HPM, Central Asian and Indian nations can be declared on by just using the free The Great Game Casus Belli, which is an extremely infamy efficient way to expand, and you will get events to annex the Central Asian sultanates anyway. Actually fighting the British in India can be sort of difficult because of the terrain. If you succeed, however, you have access to some of the most populated and rich agricultural provinces in the game. Some mods have British India be a puppet of Britain instead of a colonial territory, so you can release that or even have the puppet transferred to you for 100% war score. Finally, there's China. I don't think I've ever seen anyone actually focus on China as Russia, because it's not that fun in single player, and most multiplayer lobbies have rules to prevent players from taking Chinese states since it can actually break the game. So if you just want to do something different and a bit memey, then go ahead and just dunk on China for your entire playthrough. I think that's pretty much it. I do plan on making Victoria 2 content, so stay tuned for that. God bless.